Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CDL podcast channel. In this episode today, going to be a pretty much reaction episode to all of the news that's come out. Obviously, maybe not a ton of league news, but recently the timeline has pretty much blown up since our last podcast. We've had pros, personalities, owners, former pros, current owners, everybody chiming in, talking about the state of Call of Duty, not only the game, but the CDL and competitive Call of Duty in the content side as a whole. So we're going to really dive into that and give our thoughts on it today. But before we get into that, Kyle, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's that kind of time of the year where you kind of start forgetting what day it is, kind of. Just because there's like Christmas backs right into New Year, and then it's you they were both on weekends this year, so you kind of just start forgetting what day it
Oh yeah.
is. We had some family stuff going on, and just a lot of stuff to kind of just distract you from the calendar and what's been going on, which is it's a welcome relief, but the reality is starting to hit back in now. We're in the dead of winter, and it's just hoping to get some good Call of Duty coming up here soon to kind of bring some light back in, but I won't hold my breath on that one.
Yeah, we were counting down. We figured out this episode and one more are the last two episodes before we have some predictions and some real COD to actually talk about. Because coming up in about what 2-3 weekends from now, we have the Kickoff Classic. So we're actually going to see our first taste of real. I guess it's not the Kickoff Classic doesn't have anything to do officially with points, but teams are going to be going relatively hard, and we're going to at least get a decent look at what they're going to look like this year. So I think we're both excited for that to actually have some official matches to look on, not just scrims where you never really know how hard people are going. But before we get into all the news, if you guys would drop a like, comment, and subscribe on this video, that'd be greatly appreciated. Or check us out on the audio platforms. We've been having some pretty good feedback. Had a lot of new commenters over the last few weeks as well, and we'd love interacting with you guys. It's honestly our favorite part about the podcast, and when we post it, is interacting with all the current and new members that join the community. So if you guys could do that, it'd be greatly appreciated. But we're just going to dive right into the news. Like we said, it's going to be an episode full of reactions to the recent news in the timeline and the Flank and the Optic podcast and just everybody talking about Call of Duty and its future. And we're going to kind of join in that conversation. So, first thing, I feel like we should probably start out with the thing that kind of kicked it all off, which was Censor and Nadeshot kind of going rogue on the timeline. And that got the whole community talking. Really, Censor kind of started it, got some people to talk about it. And then when Nadeshot replied, that really kicked it off. Got Hecz involved, got a bunch of people involved. Adam Apicella gave us the solution to fix the Call of Duty League. I think we'll start out by reading that Doug tweet that kind of kicked everything off. I think we'll definitely have some mixed opinions on this, so maybe we'll discuss that before we get into the Nadeshot tweets that he replied with. But the initial tweet that really got all of this unraveled was Doug saying the COD League would literally blow up if every team in the league streamed scrims and the players simply acted like themselves. There will be a huge amount of people that will watch teams every day, and it will encourage new people to watch, create storylines, shorts, etc. And he had a little follow up tweet that said, to see all these 48 guys collect a bi-weekly paycheck with quarterly bonuses to simply get on and scrim without thinking about the future of the game, then hop off and do nothing makes me so sick inside. A lot to unpack there, Kyle, but initial thoughts you have on Doug's tweet? Agree, disagree? Maybe parts you agree with, parts you disagree with?
Yeah, this is a lot here.
It is.
First of all, when I checked the timeline, I think this is like the 30th or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, he tweeted on the
and
30th.
yeah. So I hopped on Twitter. I was like, oh, okay, scrolling through, and then all of a sudden I see like all these people just like tweeting like all this down bad stuff, and I immediately hop over to my DMs. And I'm like, Ryan, what is going on? Like, did I miss something big? Like, what did the game just like say that they're like not releasing a title anymore? Or what's going on with Call of Duty? And so then we kind of got to the bottom of it with the whole censor stuff. But yeah, he's saying that he wants people to just stream scrims and kind of put that
Mm-hmm.
out into the ether and use that for content purposes. Um, I'm not exactly sure I agree that that's the way to blow the league up, as he would say. Um, I think that and I think I've made this point before, is that you know, I really think that they would be doing themselves a favor to kick off the competitive scene very early on in the game cycle, just to capture that initial boom of players that are playing multiplayer. And
Absolutely.
I don't know. I think I could go a lot more into detail, but that's I don't really agree with what Sensor's saying with if we had these 12 competitive teams and like the players all like Twitch streaming their scrims on a daily basis, that
Mhm.
would like grow the league more than it is now. Sure, we might see an uptick in like Twitch viewership, but I don't know. I mean, I definitely see where he's coming from, but I'm not sure I have the same philosophy.
I agree. There's like parts of it I agree with. I don't think by any means pros streaming their scrims uh could hurt at all. It wouldn't be a bad thing, but I don't agree that like if every team streamed their scrims, it would just blow up the league. Because I think when Doug is looking at this, I think he's thinking of like the Black Ops 2 days when the Optic team streamed from the Optic house their Black Ops 2 scrims, like it was like blowing up, which is 100% true, but there's a lot of differences between that time period in that game and what we're currently playing. I mean, that time period was like the first team house ever, like people were like super interested in that, and Black Ops 2 is obviously like one of the like biggest booming games ever. Everybody loved it, and I mean, it was super popular. And now it's like, okay, we've seen these players for a number of years. This isn't brand new for them to stream their scrims. And besides like a super heavy competitive audience like us that are just going to pretty much love COD no matter what, just because we love the competitive aspect and the storyline so much. Like, if I was just a casual Call of Duty fan, there is no way I'm tuning into scrims because I mean, this game is just not that good, simply, especially competitively. So you don't want to sit there and watch scrims. You don't care that much about the storylines when the game isn't that good if you're not a super hardcore fan. So I don't necessarily agree uh, that streaming scrims is just an automatic way to blow up the league, especially when the Call of Duty title isn't good. But I agree from the standpoint that like if you're talking like generally as content, if every team produced good content, I do agree in that sense. I just don't necessarily agree with the notion that it has to be scrims and then they'll blow up from that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's other ways outside of league matches to boost viewership. We have to remember that these guys, their full time employment is playing Call of Duty, and a lot of the times their scrims are taking place during a normal workday, at least for North America scene. So it's not like,
Mhm.
everyone has time to just like sit down and watch two series of respawn scrims, at 1 in the afternoon or something. Uh, that being
Absolutely.
said, if we, maybe if the CDL sanctioned more like weekend 2Ks or, just more things where, you can get a little bit of competitive flair on the weekends or something, outside of these kind of makeshift tournaments where the teams aren't technically allowed to play under their team name. It's kind of like a mixed bag of like content creators and pro players and stuff playing like Tuscan Hardpoint all day or something like. uh I don't know, I just feel like that might be a better avenue. um
Mhm.
but the other point that Doug makes is that like they should be uploading more and making TikTok shorts and
Yep.
all this stuff. I totally agree with that. Um, I think the statistics on TikTok is that it has a higher retention, or like on screen time than even Instagram or Twitter.
Mm.
So it technically is like the most like quote unquote addictive or captive audiences on TikTok. So
Yeah.
and coincidentally, I don't even have a TikTok. I think I missed that boat by about like 3 or 4 years. I'm 27, so yeah, I definitely don't have a TikTok. Just me personally, but yeah, I think that if these players were at least had a social manager or something like that to specifically just like promote them, promote like their competitive stuff on
Yeah, tweet
social
out the
media.
clips or post the TikToks for
Yeah,
them.
yeah, exactly. Like the players don't even have to do anything. They could just have like one or two social guys who like are
Mhm.
just like TikTok geniuses, because I know it really takes like some kind of like, skill gap to be able to like craft a good like to make a good TikTok. See, I'm sounding like a boomer right now. Um, but yeah, I mean, just if they had some kind of team support like that. But I don't think we see a lot of that in the current state.
Yeah, I agree. There needs to be, like you said, it doesn't even have to be the player specifically doing all the work. They can have social media managers and people to edit the clips for them. They just have to have either the stream on or the record button hit in order to actually have those clips. Uh, it's such a weird argument too because it really struck a chord with a lot of the community. Like I have a couple tweets from some of the pros. Like I don't know, Simp was really saying like he doesn't like to do it because like you can get a lot of people criticizing you in your chat, and then it just kind of creates bad vibes and like a toxic mindset. And some players in your team don't want it streamed, so then it just makes it unproductive practice, which I get because he is saying like I am a competitor first, and my first priority is winning, which I also get. And then there was also Clayster when he responded to Doug here. I'm pulling it up. Basically, after Doug's first tweet talking about every team or the league would blow up if every team streamed the scrims. And then Clayster said, "This is the most short-sighted thing I've seen you tweet. It isn't it the league's job to encourage new people to watch, create storylines, shorts, etc. It's a complete competitive disadvantage to stream. I'm more worried about the 500K in potential prize money than creating a storyline." That's when Sensor asked him to get on the flank and talk about it, and he's like, "Okay, it's just obvious you're baiting for attention. I'll sit here and agree with some of your takes, but this isn't it." Um, he's like, "It was hell being on Optic when we used to stream scrims all the time. Your business was everywhere all the time. It wasn't healthy." So, kind of some of the other side of it too. You're seeing how Clay is like, sometimes it's just not healthy to always have your stream on and everybody see everything you do as a team. It can get a really toxic mindset, which I can also see, but we also have some nade shot tweets to dive into. I don't know which ones you all have pulled up, but I have like the main one that pulled up that I really thought was important, especially as it relates to Sensor.
Yeah, so
Um,
he kind of had three tweets here that I'm seeing. I don't know which one you have pulled up, um, but I think yeah, he kind of the first one he just kind of outlines what the the grassroots of competitive was like these 526 to 500 or 256 to 512 team brackets, for very minimal money, um, and kind of just how Activision's kind of just been uh not paying attention to the competitive community. And then he goes in to say, uh, quote, Call of Duty arguably has the most entertaining, outspoken, and personable players out of any esports community. Storylines and rivalries that literally span across a decade. Vanguard releases, and the league says you're not allowed to compete on stream together until February. And then
yeah,
he tweeted a like a laughing, crying emoji. Uh, and then his last tweet is just kind of saying that he thinks he's the fool for going to the 100 Thieves board and pleading for the money allocation to buy the what was the LA Optic spot, and getting in, and now he's saying that he kind of looks like an idiot because he saw this potential and it's kind of been slow to start. So um
hmm
so what, I don't know, what do you take away from that? Because Nate Shot was kind of the other big follow up. Obviously, he's the CEO of 100 Thieves, the founder.
yeah,
Um,
and pretty much like a founding father of Call of Duty esports as well, and really Call of Duty
exactly.
content in general. And the other tweet that I saw that I think also adds to this conversation that I wanted to say was he replied to Pac-Man, Simp, a bunch of people who, let's see, Pac-Man was talking about um, the classic argument you hear that I think is kind of a short-sighted argument as well that people like don't think of the counter to is he's like, Pac-Man says you should in no way have to stream scrims. It's not your responsibility, and it's extremely lazy fix to the larger problem. We don't see Laker practices, Patriots practices, League of Legends practices, just not a real fix whatsoever, which I get where he's coming from, but like there's a pretty easy counter argument, and Nate Shot provides it, which is the one I wanted to talk about a little bit. He says, I would argue that all those games and sports you listed are predicated on competition first. Call of Duty competitively was built by the players' relentless love for this game, not by the structure of the game itself. Entertainment needs to be showcased, which I think when people say like, "Oh yeah, you don't get to watch NFL practices or NBA practices or like League of Legends or Valorant practices," the big difference is Valorant was specifically built to be a competitive game. League of Legends the same, and obviously football, basketball, the pro sports are obviously built to be a competitive game that you're completely playing to win. Call of Duty is built as a casual game that ended up having a passionate fan base that created the competitive out of it. That's the big difference. Which I think the people that compare it to League of Legends and Valorant, I don't think that's a good argument because yeah, it might be nice that they don't have to stream scrims or create a lot of content because their game is naturally built for competitive. So all of the fans are fans of competitive because they play the game to be competitive. Like there is no real casual mode. There technically is, I guess, but like nobody's really playing those games for like the casual side of it. Everybody's playing the competitive mode because that's what the game is built for. Where it's the opposite for Call of Duty. Call of Duty is initially built for the public casual mode, and then super passionate fans and the current pros really created it to be a competitive game. So that's the one thing I really liked from Nate Shot. I liked that side of the argument. That kind of explains why we have to create content because somebody who's coming over from League of Legends or Valorant might not fully get that. They're like, well, why do you guys need content? My game doesn't have that. But I think that's a good side of the argument to talk about is how Call of Duty isn't a competitive game first.
Yeah, there's a lot, and I think the eventual when we get into discussing like the flanks reaction to everything, they definitely discuss a lot of they kind of touch upon this as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I mean, maybe that Call of Duty is definitely a like a unicorn in a pack of horses. Not saying that it's like the very best esport out there. I think there's other esports that have like possibly more like competitive based games
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. But it really arises from the passion of the players, and it's been manufactured and propped up by players and content creators and people like Hecz, Hastro, Nade Shot, who have had they've kind of sculpted this thing into being a competitive esport. And
Absolutely.
I don't know, it's just a I think that's a really good tweet. I'm not exactly sure that that means that everybody has to stream scrims. Uh,
No.
maybe I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a compromise where like, you know, uh, the CDL or somebody comes in and they're like, okay, like you can practice. Obviously, they can't restrict how much you practice, but like maybe they could like just ask that you turn on your stream for one set of scrims per week or something, just
Mm-hmm.
to maybe that would create more of like an event around it where people are like, oh man, like Toronto and Florida are playing a scrim at 5 p.m. on Wednesday or something, so this is the one that we can watch, so we want to see how it goes or something. But I think getting the results, I there's a pretty good Twitter and obviously Reddit stuff. They all like they gather the meta results of the scrims and put them up and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So I don't know. I don't know if there's an easy one answer fix to this.
Oh, there definitely isn't.
Yeah. So those are kind of just my initial thoughts, though.
Yeah, I think the last tweet I wanted to just mention before we get into the flank reaction was some of the Octane ones because I think Octane also had some good insight. Because like you said, there's really no right answer. It's just interesting to see where all the pros' heads are on the topic, and it was an Octane and Hecz conversation, um, kind of still revolving around the Doug tweets. Clay kind of subtweeted and said, "I don't really get involved anymore, but trying to shift the blame of a failing ecosystem on the players is absolutely comedy." And then Octane like jokingly said, "Players' fault, no content." And then Hecz replied, "No eyeballs, no sponsors, no org business, no player salaries, no eyeballs, no sponsors, no tourneys." So he's basically like showing like the chain of events. What happens if you have no content to watch, where you get no viewers? It turns into no sponsors, no business, no league, basically. And then Octane says, "Living in the only esport where it's still the players' responsibilities to sustain their game." And then Doug basically says the mindset that I kind of like, and he says, "You get it, Sam. That's how it is. Is it fair? No, but it's what we're at, and it is what it is. So what are we gonna do about it?" And then Hecz kind of like got involved in like Octane was like, "Well, I mean, we're on the same side, but we're just arguing with each other because we all have different opinions on the same side." And he's like, "Yeah, you get it. We're all arguing with the wrong people because we all agree that we need to grow this thing, but we're not the people we should be arguing with because we're all on the same side. But I liked Doug and Hex's mindset about like, is it fair? No, but Activision clearly isn't going to give us the support. So what are we going to do? Just lay down and wait for them to give it to us? No, because it's not going to happen. So you have to do something to earn that support. And I guess just trying to get eyeballs in the game is a way that you could earn that support. So I like the mindset, but I did think it was interesting that Octane, I think, echoed a lot of what the pros are thinking, and maybe some of them didn't say is where like it's amazing that they're living in the only esport where it's their responsibilities to sustain their game. But at the same time, I don't think we can rely on Activision to do that at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at people like Scump and the other like Formal when he was competing pro and stuff. Like those were guys that would, they took matters into their own hands. They always had the stream going. They were really interactive with chat, or they still are. I don't know why I'm speaking in the past tense. But they would stream the scrims, and then they would probably stay on for another 3, 4, 5 hours post
Yep.
scrims and just kind of vibe out or do whatever. I think we see a lot of successful personalities emerge from that passion. I know that that's on their own time. So obviously there's competing priorities with players. Um, it really comes down to how much time they want to put into their own brand and um, income, I guess, because we see that
Mhm.
Twitch becomes their second source of income aside from competing. So uh, I know that they talk a little bit about this in on the flank as well, but yeah, I mean Activision, they have a very vocal minority of their players, of their user base being this competitive scene. And at what point does pushing them too hard just be like Activision would be like, hey, like this competitive thing isn't worth our time, so we're just gonna stop. Like,
Yeah, it's a
would it
danger.
ever? Yeah, I mean, like, would it ever come down to that point? Because obviously, like, they have so many more. Like, if they lost the competitive scene and stuff, like, would that really affect their bottom line too hard? Like, I'm not sure. I'm not saying I want that to ever happen, but like, at what point does Activision just get fed up with like these like the negative press and uh just a really like a really vocal uh social media scene calling them out for this? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can 100% see where you're coming from. I think the only benefit we have on that end is there's a lot of negative press around Warzone and pubs in general. Like the whole game has negative press from every angle, which for when you're part of the small community, that's good because they can't just hone you out as the only negative part and kind of take you out, which we're kind of in the smaller part of the community. So that's good at least, I guess, for us in a weird twisted way that all parts of the game are bad right now because I mean, I have a friend that's a huge zombies fan. Apparently the zombies in this game is like the worst thing that's ever been created in a Call of Duty. Uh who knows about the campaign, but Warzone, everybody's complaining about it. Like every facet of this game is being complained about big time. So hopefully that kind of saves us, at least for a little bit, because they can't hone in on us as the only negative part of the community right now. Um, but we can dive into some of like the flanks reactions if you're ready to go on to that. We had obviously on the flank, it was mostly Zuma, Krim, Aches, and Doug Sensor, and then for a little bit, like Looney was in there, and some other people. Somebody else was in there. I can't remember. Zinni was maybe in
Nameless,
there for a little bit.
I
Yeah,
hold
Nameless was in
shift.
there. Yeah, Shift got in there for a little bit. Yeah, you're right. But like the main four were Krim, Aches, Doug, and Zuma for most of it. We can kind of talk about them a little bit. First thing was like their general topic that they were debating was how to approach the state of competitive as a community, and I would say like the two big sides to it were Aches like saying we need to like somehow get there to be a change and get them to care about competitive in a way because right now we're just talking to a brick wall. And Doug was more on the side of like, yeah, that's not bad. We do need to change things, but like at some point, like it's our job to like play the game, so we just gotta like kind of just shut up and play and like deal with it. Which I kind of like a hybrid approach in my opinion because like I do think we need to get a lot of changes done and talking to the developers and like constantly like expressing our concerns with them is good on the side of Aches. But at the same time, I also do like Doug's idea that you kind of have to push through it. But I absolutely hate Doug's idea as a whole because just to shut up and continue to push through it, that means things will never change and there'll never be any improvements. So I do think we need to at least push through it to continue to have a league, but I don't think we need to shut up while we do it. I think we need to, like, you can maybe accept the fact that the game is in the current state it's in while you're playing so that you can at least get through it and play in the league and put out a good product for the fans. But at the same time, on the behind the scenes part, you need to be vocal and trying to get that change and talking about it. So I don't know. I don't really fully fall on one side, but I definitely don't fully agree with Doug. There's no way we should just be silent and let them continue to put out an unfinished game that doesn't get care about competitive at all.
Yeah, this really comes. Yeah, I mean, we've kind of as a national thing, we've seen a lot of like labor movements in the last little bit of like the actual like current political stuff, and it's because of like these unsatisfactory working conditions, and when workers, and in this case these competitive Call of Duty pros that are franchise pros, um the next logical thing if they're unsatisfied would be to walk out.
Mhm.
And um I'm not exactly sure that that would ever happen with the pros. I don't know if they would get the all 48 pros to walk out.
No, it'd be tough to get those fringe pros that just got their chance to walk
Yeah,
out.
yeah, exactly. But that kind of comes down to the thing. The argument is because Doug is saying like, oh, we we just need to buck up and you know grind through it, but he doesn't really offer how there would ever be a solution. So we're always just going to have this cycle of the pros bitching and nothing changing, and then it's a new title, and then they're bitching, nothing changes, new title.
Mhm.
So I definitely, and I've always been a person that's like, I'd rather do something than just sit around and complain, because it's so cathartic to just sit around and be like, "Oh yeah, we're all just gonna sit around and commiserate on how bad, this in this case this game is, or how bad XYZ is." But if we're not actively putting our heads together and working for a solution, then it just gets to be like the self-indulgent, uh,
Mhm.
negative thought train, and nothing ever good comes from that. Um, I don't know if I'm calling for a walkout until the game changes, because I just think that would roll into like the CDL being like, oh, okay, well, this Activision no longer supports competitive Call of Duty, so this is gone.
I could
Um,
also see the CDL being like, "Oh, all your rosters walked out. We'll find 4 new players.
right, exactly.
Challengers is there." Like, they might not care at all.
And this kind of gets into that deeper discussion on the how they tried to form a players union. Um, there's a lot more in there that m- it's a whole discussion, and would it even work, or would the CDL just like block it, like even though it's technically illegal to block the formation of a union? Would they just be like, oh well, we've evaluated the competitive Call of Duty scene, and we just don't want to invest in it anymore, so the CDL is done? um because that would be a reason for them to just like roll it up and avoid this whole union thing. But I in order to get any kind of change, there needs to be whoever is like pulling the strings at the developer or the company Activision level. They just need a whole new way of approaching it, because we've seen this for multiple games in a row now, like Modern Warfare into Cold War into Vanguard, and I'm sure in every other title's lifetime life cycle, there's always been this like continuous like bitching about what's the current state of affairs. And I just don't know how to solve it aside from you know making a competitive driven team, or so. I don't know. It just seems like there needs to be a whole nother shift of culture.
Yeah, 100%. It'd be interesting too, because it seemed like we don't know the full details about why that, like, players union fell through the first time, but it seemed like from what we heard, it was an issue of the players' pockets being touched, because they had to pay dues to it, and it was a lot of work, which it seems like a lot of this situation is a lot because of people's pockets are gonna get touched, um, if there was a walkout. So it almost seems like a lot of the same issues are at play where people might not get paid if they walk out. and people didn't want to pay for that union and like all that extra work, and it's going to be a lot of work to issue a walkout and to not get other players to sign and just play, and it's a whole big mess. But at some point you've got to have some open communication, and like every time we get Treyarch around, it seems like that communication pipeline gets pretty good, and we have an overall year where the players are pretty happy with the competitive side of the game. We get a lot of fixes to that side of the game, and then we go 2 years again with just no help, no pipeline, and it's like that's one thing that really makes it tough, is that you don't have a constant development studio. Even if they're releasing a new game every year, if it was one development studio, it might be easier because you have the same people every time. But I mean, you only see them once every 3 years, and half the employees probably change. So maybe your old contact isn't even at the company anymore. So it makes it really tough. I guess the second part about what they talked about in the flank is whether or not pros need to be more active on social media platforms to grow the game and their brand. I think we kind of touched on that pretty good with the whole censor and nade shot tweets and like the whole timeline kind of blowing up. But from what they said, like they kind of agreed as well that like players do need to be more active in some fashions, but like not all the people on the flank really agree that like they have to be producing like YouTube or stream content. But I guess from my side of things, as somebody who got into competitive Call of Duty through like randomly seeing, I mean, I just loved playing League play in Black Ops 2 and like earlier before I really knew what competitive was. I just liked like the GB side before I even really realized there was full on tournaments. And then I remember randomly when I was homesick one day, I saw like a highlight video of like the champs, and I was like, this is cool. And then I discovered Optic and like watched a lot of their videos. So from somebody who firsthand got into the scene through like content and social media and videos and stuff, I feel like there's a lot of people like that. So I do believe players need to be pretty active, and I don't really think there's an argument that can change my mind as somebody who firsthand got into the scene through content. And I know there's a lot of people like me out there that got into the scene through content. So I do strongly believe that players have to be active on social media platforms, because not only if you want to be a selfish player and not even look at like, I don't care about if the league grows or not. I'm a good Call of Duty player. I'm going to collect a paycheck until I can't anymore. Well, what happens when you're not good enough to play anymore? If you've grown your social media a lot, you have a brand and you can just coast right into being a content creator and maybe streaming or something after your pro career is done. So, I mean, I'm a person that strongly falls on the side of players needing to at least try to grow their social media for not only the league but themselves.
Yeah, definitely, and it kind of comes down to what I said beforehand with players being really their own best advocates on a second source of income. With turning on the Twitch stream and just or doing something, uploading YouTube videos. I know there's been more players getting into that. It's kind of easy to tell that they're more just like they have a person that's uploading it for them, but still like they're growing their channels. They're getting viewership numbers, watch hours, engagements. Those are all good things for their own brands. Uh, do all of them have personalities that are going to transition perfectly into a post competing online presence career? I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen that with obviously like Zuma jumped out of competitive and started doing like these reaction uh streams, and eventually that turned into the flank with Ben, and now Aches is coming into that, and it's like they've completely taken over the uh like the competitive COD reactions slash podcast scene. And so that really just shows the benefits of that. And obviously you have people like Scump and Formal, who are you know some of the biggest streamers out there in general. um and to name some others, I've seen like Shotzi and Dashy, and I think Illy's even gotten into streaming as well. um and the list goes on. Obviously Crim Clay, uh Attach, all these guys stream. um but yeah, I mean, it really comes down to the point of how much do you want to invest in growing yourself on social. And because we've seen that really just ties into growing your brand and growing the game at the end of the day. So
Yeah, it
that's
also I I don't necessarily like obviously every single player might not want to transition into being a content creator because flat out it just might not be for some of them
Hmm.
by their own choice. But I also think growing your social media to at least be somebody like even if you're not making constant content, but at least you're like actively tweeting or maybe posting the occasional video like once a week or something, or like doing something to produce some sort of way that fans can connect to you can also help you in the long run get a position of management at a team or a potential position at the developer to do something like we saw like Rambo and Merc do, and even Mud Dog. Like those guys all had positions at the developer. I think even just having somewhat of a social media presence that you're respected by the community can get you in a position where, I mean, think about guys like Dens and Zed. They're pretty well respected by the community because they were personable players who were at least active on social media and were well liked by the community. And that probably, along with their connections to the Boston organization, helped them get a job there. So I think just even if you don't want to be a content creator, just having a decent following that shows that you have some credibility. Because like they said on the flank, I mean, besides like a few teams like your Optic, your Envy, your 100 Thieves, like when coming into the league, like a majority of them had no history in Call of Duty and had no idea what they were doing and like who was who in the community. So they went off a lot of the community's respect. So just with these teams that might not have a lot of experience in Call of Duty and more expansion teams that could be coming, just having a presence on social media that shows you're well respected in the community might be able to get you a job that isn't even content related.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. Also, like for some of these teams that are, kind of in the middle to bottom tier of like active social people, like they're not going to promote their own players. So it's really on the players to, you know, promote themselves. And that might be the reason why they get a chance next year or the year after that
Mhm.
because they've remained relevant. Like let's just take like a hypothetical, like if one of the top tier teams had to look to replace a guy, like one guy for next year, and let's say you had like somebody like a decimate or a fellow on Paris or somebody or temp on Paris or John even. Like what if they all of a sudden are like promoting themselves a lot and they're getting into the content and everything, uh and then they're remaining relevant and they're also performing halfway decently as well. Like that might be a reason why they get picked up onto a bigger team.
I think you would really
um
argue Zinni's the perfect example this year. He's a good player, but I don't know that he's guaranteed pickup without his content.
oh yeah, for sure.
Like he definitely would be in the consideration, but he's been popping off in terms of numbers on his stream and like social media. He's got to be one of the top guys out there. That's not an Optic. So you could make an argument that he's the perfect living example of somebody that is a good player and definitely would have got the look regardless. But social media boosted him to get a chance to play in the league.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I wasn't even thinking along the lines of like who currently has done that, but like,
And
yeah,
now,
because
obviously, Zinni is a good player, so that plays a factor into it.
hmm
But
yeah,
I certainly think he gets boosted, like when they were looking, because they even mentioned like they want to create some content and stuff, and they want to be a popular team and have a good fan base. And I mean, in terms of the players out there that aren't on Optic, Zinni is one of the top players to pick up in terms of that because he's been grinding his stream and is some of the better stream numbers. I gotta believe, I don't know off the top of my head, but besides like Zuma and like Gump, and I mean, he might even have more than like Dashy. Like Methods might have more than like Dashy and Shotzi and Ilya and those guys because they haven't been in Optic as long and Dashy hasn't streamed as consistently. But like apart from like Zuma, Scump, maybe a few other people, like Methods is probably up there as one of the top subbed to COD pros. So that certainly is played. I mean, that's living proof that your point can at least be somewhat true.
yeah, totally. And I just yeah, I mean, if you're gonna get looked at by any of these teams and you've been uh you've been keeping up your end of the bar, I guess it's still like a bargain, like we said, like um with promoting yourself on social media uh on these platforms and stuff, like you're kind of keeping yourself in the scene. It shows that you're still passionate, that you want to stick around. And I think that's a great example with Vinny and stuff too. And like it gives me hope for this 12th franchise spot as well. Like kind of getting into that because like if I don't think Zinni is gonna want to sit around and do nothing in terms of like team content or kind of promoting the team. I'm not saying they have to go out and do all these like you know uh like Crim bumming a cig in New York or something. But
That was comedy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so I don't know, but I mean, like, teams are putting in effort, and that's stuff that we like to see.
Yeah, 100%. Um, Speaking of Crim bumming a cig, not as related, but Krim kind of called out players for being coasters. Censor was like along with that. Censor was like, yeah, there's players who didn't want to name anybody by name. Krim straight up looked at the camera and said, TJ Haley, I'm talking to you. And then they kind of got in a little like exchange. I mean, I was gonna say heated, but was it really? I feel like they're like TJ is definitely a troll. Krim, obviously, we know is a troll. So like there's probably something behind TJ being like a little upset that he was calling him a coaster and like he was calling him trash and they're gonna beat him at the kickoff classic. And like I feel like it was half trash talk and half those two just kind of always have trolled each other since they teamed together. So like a little bit of both, but Krim specifically called out TJ. They said there's people that are coasting, which I 100% think has to be true. I mean, in any league, I feel like in any professional sports league, that's kind of the case. There are some people that are just there to collect a paycheck because they are good enough and aren't really that motivated to get better. So, I mean, I don't think we have to spend too much time on that because that's like a known thing, but it was pretty funny when Krim called out TJ and they got into their little Twitter exchange.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure that you can look around the league and see who's kind of just like held on to these spots, isn't really performing, isn't doing anything on, or is doing very minimal, if anything, on social or the streaming side to maintain or grow their popularity. Um, but yeah, I mean, these are the people that are quote unquote coasting, I guess. And they're just kind of showing up, doing the minimum, putting in the effort, when they're on the pay or when they're on the clock, but when it comes uh caring or getting better and stuff, they're just kind of doing that, like they're kind of just blah. Um
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, I don't want to call anybody out because I don't know everyone's personal situations, but I'm sure the pros could call each other out a lot more.
Oh,
Um
yeah. They know who's grinding and who's just
yeah,
putting in the minimum.
exactly. So I
Yeah.
thought that was funny, and you know anytime you get Crim and DJ going at each other, it's kind of funny too.
Anytime you get Krim going at anybody, it's going to be good.
Exactly.
All right. Next thing that was I think is interesting, and this is something that there is no right answer to because it's a completely hypothetical situation. But Doug kind of talked about how without Optic there is no CDL, and I think to some extent everybody at least somewhat sees the logic or can agree with parts of that. But like Aches made the argument that like yes, Optic had a huge part in it, no doubt. They're the biggest player in it. Hecz, Nadeshot, Scump mainly like those are the big players in it. But at the same time, he argued that like there would have always been somebody to step in there and fill that void, which I see the argument because that typically is how things go. Like somebody is the one that takes advantage of it. Hecz, Nadeshot, Scump, Optic, they were definitely the ones that took advantage of that void of content and filled it, especially in those Black Ops 2 days where we talk about them pretty much going to the moon for sure. But Aches made the argument that, somebody would step in. I guess where I fall in this is I do agree somebody may have tried to step in, but who knows if they would have been as successful in stepping in. Maybe they would have been more successful. You never know, but I do mostly agree with the take that without Optic there is no CDL. I also can see the logic that somebody else would have stepped in, but I mean the reality is Optic is the one that stepped in, so that's what we have to work with. And I would agree that at this from this standpoint, like if Optic doesn't step in and make so many people fans, like to this day, you still see a majority of the fan base being for Optic wherever they go, and that's because of that content that work that they put in 10 plus years ago on Black Ops 2, and where they carried it from there with all the team houses and everything. So I do agree that without Optic, there is no CDL because whether or not somebody else would have stepped in, the reality is Optic is the team that stepped in. They're the team that carried the popularity, and they're the team that still carries the popularity as we see 80+% of the fans probably, in all honesty, being Optic fans. So I do agree that, in general, there probably would have been somebody else that stepped in, but like I said, the reality is Optic is a team that stepped in. So I really don't think there would be a CDL or a CDL that is nearly as big if it wasn't for Optic kind of helping to grow that fan base so much.
Yeah, that's totally a valid point. I did appreciate Ake's point too when he said that it's really scary if Optic is the only reason that there's a competitive Call of Duty scene.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think in any other esport or sport in general, like traditional sport, that we see like the LA Lakers are the reason the NBA exists or something, or
Yeah.
the New York Yankees are the reason baseball exists. But then again, the comparisons don't really match up too well, so I'm not going to put too much stock into that. But the point remains that uh, it's to have the total success of your business writ large predicated on Optic. Um,
And
even
Scump
even
too
yeah,
is kind
even
of a
existing into this day, it's kind of concerning, but at the same time, I don't think we would be where we're at because I just think that Optic, they came in at the perfect time. There was a confluence of desire for content and, not even just competitive, but like, everything that they were putting out, like
yeah, pub
Optic was,
stomping, that
yeah,
stuff.
Optic was big into they were big into sniping as well.
Mhm.
That's a whole like continues to be a whole Call of Duty subculture. Um, like you had Scump uploading like the Sweat Bannon series back in Black Ops
Yep.
2, like that. Nothing competitive about it. I mean, he was calling in like a swarm. I think that was the one, right? Like a swarm or dogs or something like every like 2
Yeah.
seconds or something
On BO2,
like
yeah.
yeah. I mean, those aren't competitive. Like that's not competitive based, but just to see somebody like you know doing that, you know, the content side of that, and I don't know, but I to this day, like if Optic was to just like disappear off the face of the earth today, I still think that that might that might cause a a shakeup of like monumental proportions in the competitive scene. So I definitely see both sides of the argument there.
I mean, yeah, even if you do like a quick check through of like I was just doing a quick check through of like the Twitter followers, the Call of Duty League count has 1 million. I mean, you've got Scump has 2.2 million. He's got over double what the entire like the league's page has. You've got Nadeshot with just under 3 million. He's 2.9, almost triple what the league has. You've got Optics like team Twitter page, which has 3.2 million, which is over triple what the league has. So like you look at it from that perspective and it's like, wow, like every separate entity at Optic and the brand itself, even like Hecz and Formal are like equal in followers. Like just every little entity that's like a big part of who Optic is, like their individual accounts have more followers than the Call of Duty League's account, uh, which is saying a lot because I mean, there's more people following Optic in general, and Optic doesn't really have much. I mean, they had their CSGO team, their Halo team and stuff, but I mean, they weren't as popular in CS:GO because they went over there after Call of Duty. So like all the COD fans kind of still like them, but they didn't. I don't think they necessarily garnered like a ton of new fans. And Halo, the scene at the time that they were in, just wasn't nearly as big, so there weren't as many new fans coming over from there. So that's pretty much strictly a Call of Duty audience, and they're really big time trumping the followers of the Call of Duty League. So that's something interesting to look at. Um, Last thing we've got in relation to the flank, though, they mentioned how the current commissioner of the CDL is a former NBA 2K guy, and you and I talked about this a little bit before the podcast. I think I'd rather get a little bit more into some of the other news we have. I think it's a little more interesting, but this when I saw this, honestly, just kind of made me upset because I'm somebody that also, I mean, I'm obviously consider myself a pretty like deep member of the Call of Duty scene and have been in it for a while, competitive, casual, everything. But I also have been in the 2K scene for a while. That's something I don't think I've ever talked about that, but like I used to play some like competitive like pro am back in the day, like 2K17 days. I've been playing 2K like I used to always play my team. I played a lot of like competitive park and um pro am. For any of you that have ever played 2K, you know what I'm talking about. It's basically when like you play with your my player, and it's either like if in park it could be 2v2, 3v3, or it could be an actual full 5v5 game that everybody plays with their my player on. And that community is one of the most toxic communities. And I would say, I mean, you guys that have played both competitive Call of Duty specifically, and not even just competitive 2K, but just 2K in general, I think if there's one developer that maybe supports their players less than competitive Call of Duty than Activision does for competitive Call of Duty, it might be 2K for their players in general. They 2K every year just kind of the same issue as COD releases like something pretty much the same game and doesn't care about what the players say the issue are. Once they release the game, they don't care about fixing it and they're just like, okay, you paid for it. It's not our issue anymore to fix it, which is something kind of like what we see in the competitive scene. Like if there's one scene that cares less about their community than competitive Call of Duty, it might be just 2K. So a little scared to see that it's a former 2K guy. Hopefully it's somebody that was super passionate and was just trumped by the bigger company and saying that they just didn't care about the community. But man, that's scary because you're really having a meeting of the two communities or the two developers that just don't care about their community at all.
Yeah, I can't say I know too much about the 2K esports scene per se, but yeah, I mean, we went from Joanna Faries, and then she kind of moved up in the scene at
Mhm.
Activision, or
And it was like quiet when she did that. Like there wasn't much of an announcement.
yeah, and it seemed like she had a really good um, rapport with the ownership people, or at least the people in ownership that were vocal, like Hecz and people. But she kind of moved up, and it seems like they brought somebody else in. So I don't know if obviously promotions are a good thing for those who are involved, but
Mm.
I don't know. Like maybe this shows the amount of care that they're putting into the competitive Call of Duty scene. I'm not sure. I don't know if I'd go that far. But we've seen progressively, just adding this onto the list of grievances, I guess. So hopefully that this guy, if he does have a big sway over the competitive operations, I guess I should say, that he does a good job. So I wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing about it too is the 2K league. I don't even know if it's still around, but it's kind of a failed league and a failed esports. So it's interesting that you would hire somebody from a failed esport that when your esport itself in Call of Duty is struggling. So it's just a weird situation. And we don't even know who this person is. Like I don't think they've ever said the name, which is also very odd. As the fans of the league, when Joanna Faries left, we knew that she was the commissioner, but now that I believe she's completely gone as the commissioner, she's on to like the head of competitive or something is her title at Activision. But it's just very odd that we haven't gotten like a public statement, or and if we did, I missed it as to who this new person is that's heading up the Call of Duty League. It's just super odd. Um, but we can move on from the flank talk now. We've got really one more little podcast talk to talk about, and then some odds were released for the Kickoff Classic that we want to talk about. Couple interesting nuggets from the Optic podcast, though, the one that was uploaded within the last few days. I don't know exactly what day it was, but obviously you never know, the podcast can be recorded a week or two in advance. This one had to be within the last few days at least because they talked about all the drama that happened on Twitter with Doug and Nate, which happened on the 30th. We're recording this on January 3rd, so obviously that podcast had to be recorded within the last few days. Um, they talked about the importance of streaming to keep the scene relevant for the next generation of players, which we kind of talked about that enough. I don't know that we need to dive into that more, but like Hecz was talking about how he had conversations with multiple pros in the past and saying that, like, yeah, you might not see the benefit of this streaming right now. Obviously, you probably will in terms of your bank account because if you're streaming a lot, you're probably going to be making more money as a pro player. That's just pretty much going to be true for all of them. If they stream, they're going to make more money than they currently are. But he was saying how it's important for you to stream because it'll create the opportunity for the next guy after you to make more money, just like the people before you created this opportunity for you to make money. Kind of just like a trickle effect for all the players to come. But the main thing that I thought was interesting from this, since we already talked about that streaming thing a lot, was I think it was Formal kind of said, what teams are playing you guys tough in scrims right now to Scump after they were done talking about it, like who are the best teams right now? And Scump kind of sat there and he was thinking about it and he didn't really say anybody initially, which I mean, when I was listening, I was like Faze, and then he didn't say it and he like still wasn't saying Faze. Like, this is weird. And then Formal was like, well, it's gotta be Faze, right? And he's like, yeah, Faze. But it was weird that he didn't just instantly say Faze. So maybe Faze isn't as like dominant early in this game or maybe Scump's ego is talking and he just doesn't want to admit that Faze is super tough. I'm assuming Faze is still going to be pretty tough to play, but he said Faze, and then some shockers came out. He said Florida and Zinni's team, which was really weird. So like Florida and Boston, two teams that we honestly expected to be towards the bottom. I mean, this doesn't mean that they're going to be towards the top, but interesting to hear him say that they're some of the tougher teams to play. And then after I think Formal kind of suggested it again, he's like NYSL, and then Scump's like, oh yeah, NYSL is tough to play too. So the four teams he suggested: Faze, Florida, Boston, and New York, kind of the toughest teams that they're playing in scrims right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna put on my tinfoil hat and get super into scrims right now. Um, but yeah, I mean, we've seen, there's a bunch of different CDL Scrim Intel on Twitter. Great place to get your live time updates on scrim results. I'll shameless plug there for whoever's running that account.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of surprise teams. I think 18 and cracked today took like four. They went 4-1 against LA Thieves that I saw. It's like, oh, okay. Uh, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that, but
Is that indictment on Thieves, or are they really good?
yeah, exactly. Or was Thieves just off? They're
Mhm.
pinging bad from LA or something, or what's the deal? Um, but yeah, Florida, like we said, we're not. I think just like last week we were like, yeah, we're not really excited about Florida. Yeah, whatever. And then we hear that they're playing good in scrims, or that at least Optic Scump thinks that Florida's a tough matchup.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, that's hyping me up for Florida a little bit. I don't know. I mean, maybe Scump's just trolling. It is the Optic podcast.
Yeah, it
You
didn't
know,
seem like he was trolling, and I will say
yeah,
another part to add to that is he talked about how like, he was trying to explain to Formal how it is to play the game because obviously, like, Formal mentioned, like, when he's like, "I haven't watched a lot, but when I watch the game, it seems like there's no logic to it," is what he said. It's just and Scump's like, "Yeah, it's squad spawn, so there really isn't." Basically, what you do is you hit the hill. Once you get the kills in the hill, you have your 3 guys spread out as far as possible to cover as much of the map and spawn kill, and you basically kill horror, and then Formal's like, "Oh, that's got to be so annoying to play." And he mentioned that, like, yeah, him and Shotzzy are going -7 plus every map because the ARs are so overpowered with just getting the spawn kills and stuff. And he's like, "Yeah, the subs are going negative on every team pretty much, and the ARs are frying," which led me to believe, like, okay, maybe that's why like Florida's really good because they maybe have like Skies and Dave Patey just frying because they have 2 good main ARs. So maybe that's like the case or something. It's kind of where my brain went to because they've basically been saying that ARs are dominating in respawn. Uh, so yeah, interesting to hear that. They also said it's pretty much hell scrimming because all you're doing is playing all 5 of the hard points, and then you switch sides and play them on the opposite side because there's no control to scrim.
oh
So you're
gosh.
just constantly head bashing in hard point, which is interesting to hear. The other thing though from these scrims is Scump, as of like a few days ago, whenever this podcast was recorded, said that Toronto is just reportedly not scrimming. Maybe because he said like it's because there's no third game mode, so they're just not scrimming. Apparently, this is really weird to hear because the last time we heard something like this was MW. At least in my mind, last time we heard something like this was MW when Aches basically like got his team to just not scrim earlier in the game because they're like squad spawns. What is this? This is going to get changed. They're going to change the game, so we don't have to scrim on this because we don't want to scrim on
They
an
were
old
report-
build
they,
of the game.
they were reportedly told that things were going to change too.
Yeah, and they were like, "Yeah, we're just not going to scrim because the game's going to change." So like we saw how LAG did in Modern Warfare. It wasn't the most successful year for them. So this is I don't know. Maybe they just haven't been scrimming optics, so they haven't seen them scrim. But they have like the full page of like who everyone's scrimming, and it'd be really shocking to me if Toronto's just not scrimming at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe who knows exactly what the reasoning is. Maybe Toronto guys went home or something for
Yeah,
they had to go back to like to the EU for the holiday or whatever, and they just haven't been scrimming, or they took vacation or something. But I'd be really surprised if a team made the same mistake as LAG again, um, and
especially
just
that team. You think they'd
and
be one of the most
yeah,
motivated.
and they just hung it up for however many weeks until kickoff, or whatever their plan is. I'm not sure, but I'm not gonna read too much into that. I think
Mhm.
Toronto as an org is too they're too smart to make this mistake, especially in year 3 and coming off of uh a consensus top 2, top 3 finish
Yeah,
in Cold War. Um I think they're way too smart to fall into the trap of like, oh, we're, somebody at Activision said that they're going to change everything about the game, so pointless to scrim. Hey, we're going from they said that Vanguard is just a joke, and we're going to go to jetpacks in a week or something. Like, that's not going to happen. So,
I
um,
wish.
yeah, but I mean, like, or like, I think it's kind of foolish to think that something is going to change and
Oh, it is.
revolutionize how you scrim. The gunplay is probably still going to be the same. The engine is the same, so you should be playing on the engine if nothing else.
Yeah, just to get your mechanics down.
Yeah, exactly. So, uh, like I said, but I said I'm not going to read too much into Toronto. Like maybe in a week, if we still hear, like if it becomes really like apparent and public knowledge that they're just like hanging it up and not scrimming or something, then maybe I'll get a little bit like, oh, what the heck's going on? But yeah, I'm not too worried.
Yeah, I agree. It could be something just they took a couple weeks off or something like you said. But if we still hear like maybe in a few weeks that they're not scrimmaging, I'm gonna get concerned because this is a team that doesn't seem like they would by any means be like hanging it up or like just not practicing because they always seem like a very motivated team that understands. They're like that's what their team was built on was the teamwork and the hard work of like studying VOD and everything and being so prepared. So I'd be shocked if that was the case. And Marky B seems like he would not let that happen as a coach. Um, Last thing we really had for today before we kind of get into our down bad sports moment and wrap things up was odds to win the kickoff classic were released. The betting odds via Bet365. Um, there were some initial odds that were released the night of January 2nd, and then they shifted about as of 6 hours ago. So they shifted today. They aren't, like, super shifted. I mean, the main things that they see was when they first came out yesterday, Faze was number 1 and Optic was number 2. The update as of today, Optic has now shifted to the number 1 odds to win, which is interesting. Most of the other positions of people, maybe the numbers have changed, but the positions are relatively the same. The other big riser I'm not even gonna say this one because I didn't say this to you when we were talking about it before. I wanna actually, like, hear the shock factor that you get when you hear this. I think we might have a Kyle Rage segment when you hear this. Um, but a couple people have moved. Boston really jumped up in the new ones, but I'll read them from the lowest odds to the top. Uh, and I kind of want to hear your thoughts because I think we might get you a little angry when you hear one of them.
Okay.
But we've got Legion last place. I don't think that's a shock. I think they
No.
just have them listed at like 101. I think they're just mean like 101 to 1 odds.
Okay.
So Legion are last. That's not a shock. Ravens are second to last at 67 to 1. I'm a big Ravens fan, but I can see the logic behind that. They're pretty unproven. Then we've got, I think I'll just read through them, then we can react to it. We've got Mutineers at 51 to 1, and Minnesota are both at 26 to 1. Surge at 21 to 1. This is where I thought we might get a little rage from you. The Surge are ahead of the Rocker. Gorillas at 17 to 1, Subliners at 13 to 1, Thieves 11 to 1, Ultra 7 to 1, Faze 2.75 to 1, and then Optic 2.5 to 1. So pretty interesting that I mean I would assume if odds have shifted, it's probably because there were so many bets on Optic, because obviously there's a lot of Optic fans. They probably had the most bets on them, but I think it's pretty interesting that first of all, Legion's odds are so much worse than the next like lowest team, which is interesting because usually you don't see that big of a gap. And also pretty interesting to me that Surge are ahead of Rocker. I just noticed that as I started to read this again, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. I don't know. This is kind of this is interesting, I guess to say the least. This is a single elimination uh bracket tournament, so um yeah, it's gonna be some RNG. Uh, where you fall on the bracket. How is the bracket gonna be drawn? Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not too upset about Rocker. I'd rather start slow and finish strong.
Mm-hmm.
Since you did declare them they are my team now, so I
Yeah.
will embrace that. So I will refer to them as we from henceforth.
All right.
Um,
I like it.
so anyway, not too concerned about us though. I think we'll be pretty strong in the middle to late part of the year. I think everyone would expect that as well.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to see LAG so high and LA Thieves as well. I mean,
I'm
uh,
surprised that Thieves are ahead of Subliners.
yeah, that's
I would think that the clear cut, I don't really know. I mean, I personally think FaZe should still be the number 1 odds. I think until we see FaZe not be number 1, we have to just assume they're number 1. I don't think Optic should be ahead of FaZe. Even if Optic's looking better in scrims, unless like FaZe is just looking horrible in scrims, but that's just literally not possible for them to look horrible with those caliber of players. Like they're always going to be in contention unless something is seriously wrong. Like I do think FaZe has to be 1. I can see Optic being 2. Yeah, I can see Ultra being 3. But to me, I feel like Subliner is just with Crib and Clay when you're going off such random like rankings and you just have no idea where players are. I feel like you gotta bet on Crim and Clay being a little higher, I guess, at least in my mind. I think it's very weird that subliners are behind Thieves. I still think I agree. Gorillas being that high is shocking. I think Surge being that high at 21, like pretty
Yeah.
decently ahead of Rocker is. I thought you were going to be very upset about it. I'm pretty upset about it. I just don't know how Surge are ahead of Rocker. I feel like once again, you have to go with the more steady, safe teams when it's the first event and you just don't know. And to me, I don't know why the Rocker aren't ahead of them because they do seem like the more steady, like safe team. Like if you had to place a bet right now on who you think is going to finish higher in terms of a first event, I would think that you'd probably put your money on Rocker over Surge.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
This is also a LAN tournament as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of also bet with like the proven talent on LAN and who's able to cope with like a crowd and just all that, all the intangible factors that go into
And this would be those half
something like
those
this.
Seattle players for.
It's update in the coming weeks, leading up to the leading up to the kickoff classic, because I do think that just based on where the money is going, that will drive a lot of the money lines and stuff. But I first of all, I'd like to see who's making this betting line. First of all, like I don't know, this is absurd. Just where some of these teams fell.
Yeah, I mean,
And
like, screw it. I'd put a little money down on the Ravens to make a run at such long odds, just because. Like, it's insane how much longer odds some of those lower teams are. Like I get that Optic and Faze are a lot better than Legion, but it's pretty crazy that it's like 2-1 odds basically for Optic and Faze and 100-1 odds for Legion. Like, that's pretty absurd that they're that big of a difference. I get that they probably should be, but it's just wild to look at.
yeah, if there is a bunch of like if you could like parlay teams into like I would take Ravens to the top four. I'd put a little bit of money on that.
Yeah,
Um,
at that long of odds, yeah.
yeah, I mean exactly. I mean just kind of a speculative wager there. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Where this book is, this a reputable like esports sports book or
I mean,
odds
yeah,
maker or something or
Bet365 have the 400,000 followers on Twitter verified. They've been around for
Mm,
like all esports. I think they're like there's like Midnight. I know that does betting for esports too. I'm pretty sure Bet365 is like based in EU or something. I'm not
okay.
fully sure because I think it's like technically illegal to. It is at least illegal in like and I'm in Wisconsin. It's still sports betting is still technically illegal here, but I know I think it's based in the EU, and I mean it's pretty reputable. They have a lot of followers. They're verified. I know they've been doing Call of Duty since at least I remember them being around MW. They could be even earlier. I'm not fully sure, but one of the thing I'm actually just noticing here that I wanted to mention in these odds, Ravens jumped from 81 to 67 in this last one. And I know Boston, like I said, they were 26 tie with the Rocker. In that initial one from yesterday to today, they went from 67-1 to 26-1. That is a huge jump. And them being favored a lot more. They went from 67-1 to 26-1 in one day. Everybody else was like Florida was the same, Legion was the same, Ravens had that small jump. Uh, Rocker was the same. Surge went up a little bit. Gorilla's the same. Sublime's pretty much the same. And then like Thieves, Ultra, Optic, Faze, all the same. Except like the one that moved was uh, Boston went from 67-1 odds to 26-1. That's pretty absurd. People must be really liking what they've seen out of Boston on the Scrimtail page.
Yeah, well, maybe it's Optic Scump saying that Boston's a tough matchup.
Yeah, he's influencing all the bets.
I know. I don't know. I don't know. It'll be fun to see. I'm more concerned about getting a viable third game mode,
Yeah,
making my predictions or my wagers that way. Put a couple units here, a couple units there.
yeah.
But kind of funny to see how the lines just move willy nilly. Like I don't know.
And they're going to be so much more unpredictable now because obviously we don't have as much intel, and they'll start to settle down as we actually like get to know our teams a little more and where they're at. But we're going to be discussing our predictions for that kickoff classic and the season in general. In 2 weeks from now, we'll have this episode, another episode, and then 2 weeks from now, we'll be discussing our full predictions for that kickoff classic as well as the season as a whole. We're going to do like a one episode special where we do our early predictions. Obviously, we'll probably go back and revisit them and see how accurate we are. And then as we go through the season, we'll do more updated predictions as we see stuff. But we're going to do like a season long predictions episodes. And we've talked about that might be one of our longest episodes ever because we're going to really deep dive and do our research and really kind of dive into things. So that'll be a fun one. Before we wrap up this, though, we can get into our down bad sports moment of the week. I think you all know where I'm going, so I might go first this week. I think you might all know where Kyle's going too. Pretty predictable week for us. On my side, I did end up winning my fantasy football championship in my league that I'm in for the most
Screw
money
you.
because I had Jamar Chase, and he put up. I'm in a league where you get bonus points for big plays like long touchdowns, and I think if you watch football, you saw that Jamar Chase had multiple 70-yard touchdowns this week. He scored me 65 points. And I put up like a total of 130 or 140, and then I have Chubb going tonight. So like I didn't even have that good of a week, but Jamar Chase scored me 65 points, which was enough for me to win my fantasy football league. But that's a good moment. A bad moment was, I mean, my God, the Colts looked horrible this week. They looked so sloppy. On the bright side, they looked that bad, and they still only lost to a game-winning field goal. And thankfully, the Ravens blew it. So all the Colts have to do this week is beat the 2-14 Jaguars, who they haven't beat in Jacksonville since 2014. And that's where they're going. So that's a little shaky. It is a division rival, so you never know. I'm going to be honest. I'm pretty nervous because it's pretty much almost a lose-lose situation. Like, if they win, you're supposed to beat Jacksonville, but if they lose, it's going to be pretty embarrassing that they lost to the 2-14 Jags. I mean, the Jags went 1-15 last year, and their only win was against the Colts in Week 1. So we haven't been able to beat them in Jacksonville recently. I did see a weird scenario today, though. I don't know if you saw this. That technically, I mean, I think they're going to move the Raiders Chargers since it's a play-in game. They're going to move that to Sunday night, I think, and the Colts are going to be at noon. Technically, if the Colts lose to the Jags, all the Raiders and Chargers have to do to get into the playoffs is tie, and then they both get in. So there's like this interesting scenario people are talking about that if the Colts lose in Jacksonville, will the Raiders and Chargers just knee the entire game out? So it's 0-0, and they both run the risk of not missing the playoffs. Because I think if the Colts lose and like the Ravens win or like the Steelers win or something weird happens, then the winner or the loser of the Raiders Chargers game misses the playoffs completely. So they're talking about the possibility that if the Colts lose to the Jags, that both teams would just knee out the entire game and take a tie and make the playoffs. I don't think that would ever happen because I think the NFL wouldn't let it happen, but it's kind of funny to think about that. Like they could just knee it out and they both make the playoffs because it usually never happens where like if a team ties each other at the end, they both make it. That really never happens, but the NFL has been crazy this year. But yeah, I was really sad because I wanted to see the Colts lock it up and maybe be able to rest some starters this last week because their seeding would pretty much be locked. What makes it even worse is they're most likely to get the 7 seed unless like a different game goes their way. And right now the 7 seed would play the Chiefs, who, I mean, if you're not a big football fan, Chiefs are probably the best team in the AFC. So the Colts would have a very tough draw. But I know you're going to be cheering against my team this week because if the Jags win, the Lions most likely get the number 1 pick. So we've got you against me. We've got everybody just against us. But where's your head at for down bad sports moment of the week?
New Year's Eve. It was tough for being a Michigan football fan. Michigan historically, a great football program.
Yeah.
But they've fallen on a hard, a hard 2 decades of competing. They've been outclassed by Ohio State. They're supposed to be their biggest rival. They've been outclassed by Michigan State, their in-state rival, who I would argue is more of a rival now than Ohio State is. But finally had all the pieces come together. They had a really good team all around. They made it to the college football playoff, and lo and behold, they are playing Georgia Bulldogs. And this game is the primetime college football semifinal game. So this is for the winner goes to play Alabama in the national championship, who Alabama just trounced Cincinnati earlier in the day. That was like the shoe-in game. But this game was supposed to be, everyone was hyping it up. It was supposed to be Michigan coming out and proving the national media wrong and winning. And from the first drive that Georgia had, it just looked bad for Michigan. It looked like they couldn't answer um, what Georgia was dishing out. Michigan had relied mostly on their run game all year, um, with Corum and Haskins, but that got shut down. Cade McNamara looked less than ideal. Just they didn't have any answer on the offensive side. They were just getting run up and down the field.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean it was a bitter disappointment. But it's almost better to lose that way. And I was telling you this in on Twitter. It was almost better to lose that way than
100%.
to have it be a close game all the way, and then Michigan just gets daggered in the heart at the very end. Um, but it's something to be hopeful about. I don't know. With the state of college football, any player that's worth anything goes to the NFL draft, so you have to keep recycling talent in and out to stay relevant, and that's what that's what the great teams do so well, is they recruit nationally and they just keep the talent coming in, so they don't really have to go through rebuilding years or off years. And I don't know. So it's on Michigan now to keep up the recruiting, and to stay relevant and prove that some team can beat an SEC team in the champion in the playoffs. So you know I don't know. A little bit down bad about that. But I'm not catastrophically down bad. Just a little bit disappointment to show your ass on national television like Michigan did. So yeah, so that's what I'm down bad about.
It is so much easier though in sports to tolerate a blowout loss than it is a close loss. Because like when it's a blowout, it's just like, you know what, they were better than us. We just didn't play well. Maybe they were just a better team. But like when it's a close loss, you think, well, all the little ways your team could have, like, oh, we could have won it this way, could have won it that way. But like the one I always go back to is Deflategate AFC Championship. Going into that game, I was just happy the Colts were in it because, like, I mean, they weren't expected to get there that year, and they were there, and they're playing the big bad Patriots and Tom Brady in the middle of their dynasty. So, like, you didn't expect them to win, and then they get blown out. It's like, okay, I kind of expected this. It's not that heartbreaking, but like, if they would have been in that game and like lost off a game-winning field goal or like a game-winning drive, it'd be like, man, they were so close to pulling the upset, and it's like so much more heartbreaking. But yeah, like you said, if somebody gets blown out, it's kind of like you see it coming the whole game. And like by the end of the first quarter, when they're getting blown out, you've had time to kind of process it and like almost accept it already before it's over. So I can kind of get behind that. You got anything else to wrap up before I get out of here? And I mean, you were mad that I won my fantasy football championship, but I'm hyped because I in this league I've got a couple. I think I don't remember what the prize is, a few $100 or something
Okay.
to win, which is cool. But this guy that runs it runs two 10-team leagues, and then the winner of each 10-team league plays each other in like what he calls like the Super Bowl. Like these are like the conference championships, and then we like play for like an extra like $400-500 for uh the Super Bowl, he calls it. So I have to play like the winner of a different league next week now, so I
Hmm.
could have a chance to win a bunch of bonus money. So I'm pretty excited for that. And most of my players are all players that are on teams that are like either fighting to get into the playoffs or still fighting for a seeding. So they're all going to play. Uh, I don't know if Jamar Chase is going to score me 65 again next week, but that would sure help. But I'm pretty excited for that.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know. I both of my teams, I only play in two leagues, but was eliminated in both. But both my teams happened to score the most in the entire league this week. So
That always is
a
how it
little
goes, it seems
a
like.
little bit salty. You know, I like to say that I'm finally rounding into a legitimate fantasy contender, especially in my one league where I missed the playoffs altogether, but then um, really had a second wind of life with a couple
Consolation Reaper.
yeah, well, a couple player yeah, we didn't even have a consolation. It's just like you just get seeded, I think, based on end of the season standings,
Oh yeah.
for the final standings. But luckily I avoided the last place penalty of having to pay the um pay the entry fee for the winner for next season. So
Hmm.
uh, saved a little bit of change there.
There you go.
But yeah, so fantasy is always gonna have me down bad. I'm never gonna. I don't think I'm ever gonna win. I don't think the Lions are ever gonna win.
Football is just not your thing. Michigan's might not win.
But I keep torturing myself every year. So yeah.
Hey, it's all for the fun of it. Eventually, you're gonna win one time. It's gonna be so sweet.
But like Nate shot, who's the fool now?
True. All right, you ready for me to wrap it up, and then we can get out of
Yeah.
here and start preparing for next week? All right, that's gonna do it for this one. We really appreciate you guys watching, as we always say, because we really do. If you're watching on YouTube, obviously be sure to leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. We're looking to continue to grow as we head into the season. We're talking about a lot of potential upgrades. I got some fantasy football winnings coming. We might be having a PC on the way. We're both currently working off laptops and not the highest level equipment. We might have some upgrades coming soon. So some maybe potential upgrades to the podcast coming as well. Hopefully sometime during this season, hopefully in the next few months. Oh man, if you're on the audio platforms, we'd appreciate if you dropped a follow on there. There's been a lot of traction on the audio platforms. We've been seeing kind of a lot of growth and interaction on there, which is awesome to see because that's the way I consume a lot of my podcasts. Like I've said before, when I don't have as much time, kind of click in while I'm on the road, maybe in the car listening on the way to work or just when I'm driving anywhere. It's to me, an awesome way to consume a podcast. So if you're on there, we'd appreciate if you dropped a follow or left a review if you're able to on the platform you're listening. Goes a long way for us, but we really appreciate you guys watching. Obviously, the support always goes a long way. It helps keep you motivated to continue to make podcasts in the off season when there just isn't as much content just readily available to you. But we appreciate all the support. That's going to do it for this one. We'll be back at you next week with probably an episode discussing news, and we have a couple segment ideas. We'll maybe get to that. Maybe we'll ask you guys on Twitter if you have anything in mind. And then the week after that, we get into a full-blown predictions episode. So be on the lookout for those the next couple weeks before we get into the season. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.